Hey, good morning again. If you missed me the first time, you can catch me the second time. So, guys, today we're talking about how there are millions of dollars trapped in your brain, trapped in your pen, trapped in your mind, and why it's extremely important that you get those out. For those of you who don't know who I am, of course, my name is Reverend Dr. Danielle Patterson Winningham. I'm a former JP Morgan Chase Vice President, Master Life, and Master Business Coach. And over the years, I've written hundreds of books for myself and others. And one thing I can tell you is that when you write and when you tell your story, you actually turn your test into a testimony that is going to free somebody else. And as you're coming in, definitely say good morning and where you're coming in from, share the broadcast, because as women, we need to start telling our story. When you don't tell your story, let's just say you get into a fight with somebody. You don't tell anybody y'all got into a fight, but the other person tells everybody. So then it becomes their story that is the truth. And if there's nothing we know about a story, is that there's always two sides to every story. Good morning, Ariella, coming in from Beaumont. There's always two sides to every story. So when you don't write your story, when you don't tell your story, you're leaving your story up to be told by others. So I'm having a free webinar this Sunday at 7 p.m. Make sure you register bit.ly/right now 2022. And I'm going to be talking about why it's critical to write your story and how you can even get your story on the fast track. One thing I hear about people all the time is that they take years and years and years to write their books. And unfortunately, time is steady ticking. The world is steady moving, and sometimes we just don't have time like that. I think it was Miles Monroe and said some of the richest dirt in the world is at the cemetery, because when we don't write our stories, we take those stories to grave with us. I wish I had books from my mother. I wish I had books from my grandmother. And I don't want to leave my children in this world wishing that they had books from me. So when you write, not only do you free yourself, but you're freeing somebody else. And that's where the compensation comes from. You know, our compensation is a direct correlation with the number of people that we serve. So when you serve somebody else by helping them with your story, what happens is that you inadvertently serve yourself. I know many of you here have thought about writing a book before. If that's you, go ahead and say me in the chat. But what happens when you get that first book out, there's so much behind it. Journals and courses and training and coaching. And one of the reasons that you're not able to even formulate your ideas is because you don't necessarily have the structure of writing a book. So writing a book does so much for you. It releases that spirit of procrastination. If you can finish a book, you can finish anything. It also opens up and broadens your creative horizons. You start to have more ideas and the ideas just start to flow. There's also a certain discipline required to not just write a book, but publish that book. And the feeling of accomplishment that you receive when you finish it. These are the things that you need. Stop, could you stop before you knock the camera down? These are things that you need in order to run your own business. And if you can't finish a book, how do you run a business? And books are what launched me into a multi-million-dollar business. So I thank God for books. They're not going to ever go away. Video is here to stay, but there's always going to be books. And there's something about putting your story out there that kind of emboldens you. It gives you a certain level of courage. and you may be questioning now, should I write? What should I write? Join the webinar, and we're going to talk about how to get some help with all of that. bit.ly/write now 2022. So go to that link and register. But books are just the calling card. It's just the starting point for so much more. And just the ability to be able to organize your ideas. I think that that's a blessing you're going to get from books. And then just being one of the ones who did it. So many people want to write a book. So many people start writing books. So many people think about writing books. So many people are prophesied to have a book in them. But where are these books? Because most people don't think enough of themselves, their testimony, or their story to finish the process. So there's something to be said for writing your book, being a part of history, having something in the world that will always exist, even when you don't. I think that sometimes we think so low of ourselves that we think, who's going to read this book or who's going to need this book? And that's not our job. When God gave us the test, he knew that the testimony would free somebody. And as a result of that, it is up to us to birth those books, to write it down, to get those journals out there, to take this process. Because this process is a very important process to not just us and to our families, to our legacies, but also to the world at large. So for those of you who are up in the air, or you've started writing and you haven't finished, you've thought about it forever and still thinking, it's time for you to do something different. This is a whole new world full of new opportunities, full of new adventures. And, you have to be willing to go. Don't let COVID stop you. As a matter of fact, COVID should have slowed you down long enough that if you knew how, you could have wrote several books during COVID. Most people can write a book in the time that it takes to travel back and forth to work. And Aurelia, I hope you join, because again, we're going to be talking about some tools that you need to help you finish your book faster, to help you finish your book more soundly, and even to go on to write other books, which so many people do and so many people need to hear. So with that being said, if you haven't joined the webinar, not only make sure you do, but also make sure you tell a friend. Make sure you bring somebody else in this journey so you guys can hold each other accountable. I think that one of the things we are really missing is sisterhood. So if you've finished 3 of the 5-part set, why not go ahead and publish something? That's just a question. We don't have to finish everything. Harry Potter came out one movie at a time. And so sometimes we hold on to things and we don't have to release it and see what happens. You may have a publisher pick up the rest of the set, and now you're getting paid to write. There's just so many opportunities that I think we keep ourselves from because we have way too many people and way too many conversations with ourselves. And we got to start talking to somebody other than us, because yourself is going to slow you down every single time. So I just want to encourage somebody today that may not think they have a book in them, who may not think they're qualified to write a book, who may not think they're good enough. Hey, Vicky, you've been quiet, girl. I've been missing you. That may not think they're good enough to write a book. I just want to encourage you today that somebody somewhere needs your story. Somebody somewhere needs your testimony. Somebody somewhere needs to know how the story ends. Needs to know that this is not it. Needs to know that. And let me tell you what I fought myself with. I struggle with, good morning, Monisha. I struggle with growing my brand and really doing it as big as I possibly could. I struggle with that. And because of that, I know that there are women out there who are not getting help living their dreams, that are not getting the money they need to build their businesses, that are not getting the right counsel because I'm holding myself back. And I think that for all of us, that is going to be what we pay the penalty for when we get to them pearly gates, is did we do everything we could with what God gave us? If he put you here to serve a certain people, did you serve them? If he put you here to cater to a particular industry, did you cater to them? If he put you here to solve a certain problem, did you do everything you could to solve it? And if any of those answers are no, then we've got to do more. That song by Shekinah Glory that says, with your heart and mind, say yes. The chorus said, there's more that I require of you. Yep, sis, join us. Make sure you join us on the webinar, sis, because even though you've written a book before and you haven't gotten it published, I'm going to have some resources on there for you to get discounts on your publishing. So sign up. It's a free webinar, bit.ly/rightnow2022. And Paula, I don't think it's an accident that you're joining. Aurelia, I don't think it's an accident that you're joining. You know, God is very intentional in his instruction. And more often than not, we're running around trying to confirm what God is telling us when this is the confirmation. So there's so much money, opportunity, exposure trapped in our ability to write. I think every person should have 2 books, 3 books, 4 books, because we've got that much of a story to tell. We've got that much knowledge. We've got that much influence on the world. And so I think it's up to all of us to make sure that we're telling our story and leaving that story for the next generation. Leaving those recipes for the next generation. Leaving that wise counsel and advice for the next generation. I wish my mama would have left it for me. I wish my grandmother, I was looking for a recipe to this cake that my mother loves. She called it a 1-horse pudding. As a matter of fact, I'm going to call my aunt in a moment. I wish I had the recipe somewhere just so I could make it, even if I messed it up. We've gone for the last hundreds of years not being able to read and not being able to write. Now that we can read, we should. And now that we can write, we definitely need to be published. We need to read and write for every ancestor that went before us that got beat for trying to read and got beat for trying to write. We need to read and write for every child that's going to come behind us that feels like these computers are enough and that they don't need to write. And our voice absolutely matters. Our story changes the way things end, but we can't let everybody else not only keep writing our story, but keep taking credit for our history. Do you know how the history books were created? Even Jack Daniels, the popular whiskey. Jack Daniel had an African American man who was his steel master. And because he was African American, even though he brewed the liquor, and they called him Uncle Nearest. His name was Nathan Uncle Nearest Green. And they say that he was the hidden ingredient to Jack Daniels whiskey. He was the first known Black master distiller. But because we didn't write the history books, then guess what? We didn't get credit for the whiskey. Mm-hmm. So we've got to understand that there are a lot of things that we're not getting credit for because we don't pick up our pen and tell the story. And like Vicky said, I want to tell my story my way. You better. You better. Because when you don't, you become the thief. When you don't, I'll give you another example. They talk about Attila the Hun, how ruthless and how cutthroat, but his people loved him. And the reason he robbed and pillaged was because he had a big following and he wanted to make sure all his people got fed. But when you look at Western civilization, who he robbed and pillaged, of course, they're going to call him crazy. They're going to call him bad. But we don't know the other side of that. Because here again, this is the same people that put us in slavery. You want to talk about what Hitler did, but you don't want to talk about what you did with the blacks. You want to talk about what Joseph Stalin did, but you don't want to talk about what y'all did with the blacks. And so that's another George Washington Carver, who laid the plans for Washington, D.C. We don't get the credit because we don't tell the story. We don't write the books. We don't pick up our pen. We think it's above us, or we think we're too good for it, or we just don't take the time. But it's time. And I don't know how many more times he's going to have to keep calling you out. I don't know how many more times he's going to keep having to point the finger at you. I don't know how many more messengers he's going to have to send before you get it. Stop waiting for confirmation, people. Stop waiting for confirmation. That clock is ticking. It is already January 14th, 2022. Feel like just yesterday the ball dropped. Stop waiting on confirmation. I'm going to get out of here, guys, and go eat me some brunch. I just want to make sure I get everybody that needs to be in this webinar on Sunday there. Don't miss the opportunity to unleash some of the millions that are in your pen. Understand that there's a high cost. There's a high cost for procrastination. Not just money, but exposure, credibility, discipline, structure. It's a high cost for procrastination, even down to your freedom. Because had I not had the discipline to finish those first 2 books, I would still be at my job. Those books were just proof that I could do something to make money outside of that infrastructure. And once I learned that, you couldn't hold me back. You couldn't hold me back. So it's time for some of you to learn that your story has a value. And it's time for you to start exercising it. Time for you to start using it. All right, love you guys. I'll be back a little bit later today. Don't forget, our bus is going to leave early in the morning. Start next week. We'll be here at 7:30 p.m. on King Day, and then 6:30 every morning. So make sure you catch the early morning bus. Love you guys.